So let's give you some background to the conversation we're having. This is what is in the news this morning. Nigeria's privatization bureau, called the BP, says the Yola Power Distribution Company, or the DISCO in that region, and Afam Power PLC are up for sale to new investors. Well, Yola Disco was already privatized, of course, in November 2013 among other 10 power companies that were privatized under the Jonathan's administration. But the BP now says it wants to sell the Yola Disco because the investor says we don't want anymore, we're handing off, so take your business back and give us our money back as well. So, but the BP is here to refund the core investors $146.8 million, which they paid for 51% equity for the Yola facility. Meantime, the Bureau of Public Enterprises was quoted this morning as saying that approvals are being sought to engage transaction advisors for the resale of Yola and a fresh privatization of Afam Power PLC. The Yola Disco operator issued repeated force majeure on its coverage areas of Yobe, Adamawa, Borno, and Taraba. Those 5 states, and if you include Benue State and a few others, that is Nigeria's axis of evil, where you have the deadly Boko Haram insurgency and the current deadly clash between farmers and herders. So that's the corridor where the Yola Power Distribution Company bought that facility there to distribute power. But instead, they have a problem with this region so far, and they've declared force majeure, says we can't do business there. Now, the Yola Disco is telling the government we want to get out. But we need to get in power to the people. So let's start that conversation. And we thank you very much for hanging in there with us for this conversation. Mukhtaar Tijani, who is a member of the advisory power team to the Buhari's administration and a special advisor to the president on power. It's good to have you on the program. And of course, down here in Victoria Island via Skype is my good friend. I keep forgetting his name if he's my good friend. Thank you. Jubril Karim. It's good to have you. We should be connecting power more all the time. I remember the Abuja guy's name more than you because they are the ones holding power. So that's where we're going to start from. Mukhtaar, let's start with you. Bring us up to speed where we are as far as the President Buhari's administration's power project is concerned.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mofaye. Good morning. Good morning, Jubril. So I will speak on the on-grid and the off-grid initiatives by the federal government of Nigeria. Speak briefly on the on-grid. As we know, since the inception of this administration in May 2015, there was only about 2,600 or so megawatts that was distributed. But today, we're averaging over 4,000 megawatts. This has been done by sheer hard work by the ministries involved in coordinating the power sector. There have been various interventions, financial and technical interventions that has led to this incremental power being delivered to Nigerians. The financial interventions are giving the generation companies confidence to invest more and expand their capacity to deliver more power to Nigerians. The distribution companies are also doing the same. The transmission company, as we know, has expanded its capacity from 5,000 to about 7,000 megawatts today. There's about odd 2,000 megawatts that the Honorable Minister of Power Works and Housing is working diligently to see how we can distribute, as the distribution companies are unable to take that excess 2,000 megawatts. Now, going off-grid, which is where we have a lot of impact, quick impact to SMEs, etc. So the off-grid strategy of the President Muhammad Buhari administration has a handful of initiatives. There are about 5 of them. The energizing economies, energizing education, there are the mini grids, there's the beyond the grid, which utilizes solar home systems, and there's also an energy database. In line with the economic recovery and growth plan, which seeks to leverage the power of the private sector and also unlock issues with growth of SMEs, the Energizing Economies program seeks to take power directly to economic clusters, off-grid economic clusters, to ensure improvement in growth of these SMEs. So these are the 5 various off-grid incentives for the administration being implemented by the Rural Electrification Agency. And like I said, on-grid, there's a lot of expansion and a lot of work is being done to ensure more power is delivered to Nigerians. I think it's a general consensus. Everybody would agree that power has improved over the past 2.5 years.
Well, thank you very much for giving us that tune of that conversation for us and giving us a bit of a very brief statement of where we are on-grid and off-grid. Jibril, let's bring you in on this. What do you consider as the state of on-grid power as we speak right now of the administration?
Well, I can't really, I don't really have any ground to disprove anything that Mukhtaar has talked about in terms of increasing the volume of electricity generated. Of course, it has increased from when they took over in 2015 up to now. However, it has not been at the pace that was anticipated. And that being said, I think the most important factor that has not really worked out well for me is that the focus has so much been on short-term sustainability as against long-term sustainability. And what do I mean by this? What I mean by this is that if you look at the entire industry, the administration, whether in 2019 or 2023, will eventually depart. What you want to build is an industry that is sustainable in the long run. So what we have now is that the power sector as it is today is not self-sustaining. And this has translated to different issues in the power sector. That means governments have to step in at different times in terms of subsidizing consumers and also directly involving themselves in projects. So what we have is a situation where the industry on its own cannot stand alone and operate without interference from government in offering all these subsidies that I discussed earlier. So for me, I do think, yes, work has been done in terms of transmission. Transmission grid capacity has increased from the 4,500, 5,000 level it used to be to about 7,000 as it has stated. Of course, our available capacity has always been above the current generation level, but has not been properly utilized. Of course, our available capacity has also increased and utilization has increased a little bit. But another factor that has always plagued the industry still continues in terms of maximizing the available capacity. If you look at capacity utilization today and the constraints that gas brings to generation that is available, that is being utilized today, is still very high. If we can deliver gas to every power station that is ready to fire today, we would definitely be talking something above 5,000 megawatts. But that is not there. So we have to have a more comprehensive reform that is built towards a long-term solution as against claiming short-term victory of moving to 4,500 or getting closer to 5,000 megawatts. That's not the end goal. The end goal is to have a sustainable power system, a sustainable power system that can survive beyond the administration.